So we went on a date night tonight and ate way too much food.
We both feel sick.
After she drank like 6 cups of tea.
It was 4.
The waiter was running constantly.
'Cause you're my Valentine. You're my Valentine. Let me say I love you.
So we wanted to jump on here and share what we learned over the last 2.5 months or 2 months.
Babe, it's been 2.
2 months. Sorry. 2 months of marriage. We definitely don't have it mastered, but we are learning constantly, aren't we?
Yep. So we got married whenever I was 18 and he was 23. He's turning 24 at the end of this year. I just turned 18 3 months?
Something like that.
3-4 months before that, before we were married. And so far, marriage is great. We love marriage. For us, it's what God had in store for us of getting married young. It's not for everybody. It depends on everybody's maturity levels and where they feel God is leading them.
I think a lot of people probably throw out getting married young.
Yeah.
Because they don't think they're mature enough, or they don't have enough in savings, or so on.
They need to grow more before they can...
Maturity or whatnot.
Yeah, they need to grow more before they can get married. That's what we heard a lot is, well, you just need to grow up more.
More time.
And you need more time. And we would ask people that would tell us this, like, well, what can you see? Like, what do we need to be growing in? And they're like, well, you just need to grow, and that just comes with time. And for us, we went, and this brings us into one of our first points of things that we've learned, is by getting married young, you're, instead of having 2 separate lives established of, I like my things this way, I like my things that way, you're then going and merging your 2 lifestyles together early on before you have super set ways. There are things that you already have set that you don't even think about until you're married, and then you realize, like, oh, I like things this way, but he might like them a different way. And I think that can go both ways.
Yeah.
Where he sees things that he likes, but I don't. And that's okay. Learning how to work through those by communicating and talking through them and figuring out what's actually worth talking about. And saying, like, hey, I like it this way, but you like it this way. How are we going to make it so that neither one of us is getting annoyed by the way that it's going?
Yeah, and I think that's just really the big thing is communication. We've learned this so much, even over the last couple of months, just like how we communicate. Even today, we had to sit down and like, hey, okay, something's not right here. What's going on? And to work through that and kind of figure out, okay, maybe one of us is, being super selfish or super prideful, and we need to work through that and have communication. So, the whole topic of getting married young, are we for it? Or would we encourage somebody who is walking down that path? I would say, if your heart is in the right place and you're seeking after God, we honestly would be like, go for it. We have totally loved it. And I think it brings probably even more adventure for us. Moving out of state, moving where there's no support, as some people would say, has brought it even more of an adventure. It's not that we don't miss our family. It's not that we don't love our family. It's just allowed us to really bond and really focus on one another and ultimately focus on God.
And that's where, whenever he had first brought up the idea of moving, he thought I was going to be like, no, can we please stay in Colorado where both of our families are? Like, I just want to be close to everybody that I know. I want the familiarity of that. And so he just thought that's how I was going to react. But instead I was like, wait, you want to like move out of state? You'd like that? You've thought about it. Let's see if this is where God wants us to go. And so I went and I started creating a list of pros and cons while we were talking on the phone about this. And I was just like, well, this one could be a pro and a con of moving away from family. It's a con because you absolutely love family. Having family right there is great. You can keep up those relationships and you're able to have that support whenever you're married, especially whenever you're married young. If you need to ask somebody a question, they're right there to actually ask them, talk to it. You can go out on double dates. There's a lot of perks to staying in your family. But one of the things that I had seen as a pro with moving is it kind of forced us to rely on each other, but ultimately rely on God more than we would if we were by family. It forced us to do that, which I felt was a really good thing for us.
Oh yeah. But it doesn't go to say that there aren't times where we definitely miss family.
Yeah, just the other day I was crying because I was like, I miss my family. Like, I just want to be there.
It hits both of us at kind of random times, but I think in the end, it comes back to saying, okay, what is the whole purpose of marriage? Why did we get married? And a lot of people, I think, are struggling with this whole like, well, I'm 18 or I'm 19 or I'm 20. It's like the most common topic, it seems like, out there on YouTube even, like, young marriage, is it good or is it bad? I think you gotta look at it with a whole big perspective of like, why get married in the first place? Like, if it's just so you can live together, I mean, that's one thing, but if it's ultimately to honor God, to glorify Him better together, and you're seeking God daily, again, it's like a go for it. I've read tons of different articles online where it's like, well, what do I do if I don't have the finances, but you know, we're struggling with not seeing each other and we're engaged, and there is some point of that being financially like ready to get married, but I think there's a lot of weight put on that, because same with maturity, it's like, when will you ever be ready? So if you're 18, you're 19, you're 20, the encouragement from us would be seek God, number one, and make sure your, you know, husband to be, wife to be is doing the same. When you're both seeking God together, independently, God will ultimately bring you guys together, closer than you probably ever have been. And then from there, if you both are seeking God and you both feel like this is, hey, we're still on the same page here, go for it. We look back and getting married at the ages we got married at, we have zero regrets.
Yeah.
At least I don't.
I don't have any either.
And we've absolutely loved it. So it's not at all, we're not saying we're perfect though. Goodness gracious. Every day, it's like we're working through stuff. We're talking about it. One of us will get offended. It's okay, we gotta sit down and deal with it. I think a very common thing too is to have people say, well, don't go to bed angry and don't build offenses. I think I can echo that pretty clearly. Really make sure you're on good terms every single day. It's a good thing. If you notice somebody's acting a little bit off, sit down and have a chat. It's good to do.
I feel like that's just a really like general thing, but also trying to find that balance of, there's some cases where it's the fact that you're running on the like lack of sleep that create all these issues to come up. And so one of the things that we found is, on occasion, we aren't necessarily on like the same exact page whenever we're going to bed. We still make sure that we're on the same page of at least like, hey, God is in control with this. We might be different, but God knows what He's doing in it. Right now, we still love each other. That hasn't changed. There's just a slight disagreement. Let's sleep on it and talk about it in the morning. And most of the times with the smaller little issues that we were like thinking were these big things, after thinking about it a little bit longer and being able to sleep, we found that we were able to avoid an argument by going and actually having like the full brain processing it instead of just like a little part of it because you were tired. Right. And so you want to go and make sure that you're still on good terms with each other, not saying like, oh, he's gonna sleep on the couch tonight because we're having this argument. No, make sure that you're on enough page that you say, I still want them. I still want to be with them. I don't want that to change.
But you're right, sometimes getting good nights of sleep is kind of helps mend things.
Yeah.
I guess another thing we have learned, and we even were talking about it tonight when we went on a date, is setting time limit for spending. Specifically, like any amount of money.
Especially with online purchases.
Online purchases. We were in an interesting situation even recently here, where like we both got this ad on our phones for this skincare product, and they said like free trial, just pay shipping, and usually I'll avoid them, but I don't know, there's just something like, she's got some eczema and random stuff on her skin, on her chin, and I was like, hey, this could be beneficial for you, and who knows, I mean, I get random acne, maybe I should like try it out. So it was late at night, probably 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we both pulled out our phones and signed up for it. Paid our like what, $3, $4 or whatever it is for our shipping. And we got our boxes in the mail, and she opened her box and she looks at me and she says, I'm never gonna use this. Like, sorry, just never gonna use it. And I was like, oh, come on, you gotta give it a try. Well, last night I decided to give it a try. I got up at, we'll just put it this way, I put it on at like what, 11, midnight? They say put it on before bed. So I did all my face, scrubbed it all down, put the junk on it. I literally could start to smell it as I laid on my pillow. And the more I laid there, the more the smell was just so bad.
He got up at 2 a.m. to go take a shower and rinse off his face.
Oh goodness, it was horrible. It's like burning. So I got back in bed at 2 a.m. and my first thing to her was, honey, we blew unnecessary money right there. Partially because it was just a deal. I don't care what a deal is. If there's a good deal, God will hold that deal till the morning. I think that's kind of what we both concluded.
But most of the things that we were hearing is don't make big purchases after a certain time. But we just found that it doesn't matter what size of a purchase it is. There is a point where you don't need it right then. If it's a good deal, even if there isn't a deal, it doesn't really matter what the circumstance is. You don't have to have it right then.
Right.
And so much of our lives we live saying, well, we just want it right now. And we go about the right now. What's right now? We aren't focusing on the long term of it. And yes, there were things it wasn't something that was just like this really unfamiliar company. We both heard of it a lot. We've thought about it. Like it's happened before where we've like mentioned it. We're like, oh, this person's talking about it and this person's talking about it. And it's always been great things. But then it was like after I did it, I didn't think a single thing of it whenever we got it. It wasn't until I was holding it that I went and I was like, I don't like trying new things, especially on my face because I know I have sensitive skin. So I'm like, why did I just go get something for my skin whenever I don't need it?
I didn't need it. It was simply just like a pure let's try it factor, which I mean that can be great. That's how you learn. My family knows this about me. I learned by trying. So they knew that when we moved, they said, well, that may not be the wisest decision. I had people counsel me on that. It may not be the wisest decision to move right after getting married, but out of state 100%, but you're gonna learn. And I think that's honestly what we've come to is sometimes you have to spend money to learn. And so I'm not here to say to go waste your money learning. I mean, we're all gonna do it at some point, but I'm saying be careful when you spend money, especially if it's into the later hours because it can be tending to be wasted easier.
So one of the things that we were told whenever we were talking to other married couples, they had said and told us like, whenever you get married, you realize that there's a lot of things wrong with the other person. You realize the person isn't perfect. And yes, that is true, but something I wasn't expecting was how much more I realized my own sin of going and saying, yes, I knew I was going to have sin. Yes, marriage is something that grows us and challenges us in areas we weren't expecting. But whenever I'd gone and actually started to experience that, I was like, my goodness, I'm prideful, like I'm very selfish, I'm going and I'm very controlling. I have like all these different things that suddenly were coming up that I'd never seen in this way. I've seen them in little bits and pieces of like, oh, sometimes I can be a little controlling, sometimes I can go, and so with the controlling, it's more of the submission side of things of, as women, we are called to submit to our husbands. And so I was like, I don't feel like I have that much of a problem with that, but I realized it was more of the controlling side of the submission, where I was like, well, I have an opinion and therefore I'm gonna say it and I think my way is right, which then brings it into the pride. And so I noticed that it was almost more true that I saw the sin in my life more than in his. He'll ask me, he's like, well, what's a way that I can grow? And I'm just like, I don't know.
But we see it in each other. Like, I see it in my life, she sees it in her life. We can pick apart. Like, if we really think about it, we've been able to pick apart and say, oh, that's one area you can grow. Ooh, that's one area you can grow. But, like, for me, the biggest thing is a major amount of self-focus and wanting it all about me. We can see in each other of times of pride in our own lives. We can see in each other issues, but we forget how much is really upon ourselves, and it brings that out.
Like sometimes we can go and have we don't realize the expectations and our motives behind things until later. So sometimes you're just like, oh, I'm gonna be really sweet to them and I'm gonna do this thing because I wanna serve them. But then later that night you go and you're like, well, I did those things for you, so why am I not getting them now?
Right.
And you go and you don't realize that you're doing that in the moment. You're like, oh, I'm being nice, like I'm serving them. I'm going to go and like rub his shoulders while he's working. And then later that night, I'm just like, my back really hurts. Why am I not like getting the same treatment of him rubbing my shoulders now that it's later in the day and he's not working?
Right.
And so there's a lot of expectations that you put on sometimes later in the day, where in the moment your motives might have been completely innocent of saying, I want to serve him, but then later you go and you fall into the sin that follows with it of, well, I want that too. Sometimes it can seem selfish to go and say, hey, my shoulders are really tight. I lifted up a whole bunch of heavy things today when cleaning, and so I really hurt my back. Can you give me a shoulder rub? That's better to go and ask for that instead
like,
of
yeah, my
just,
shoulders hurt.
and
You know,
then,
you got really nice hands. I mean, that does. I mean, that's more
It's-
hinty than some of our stuff has
yeah,
gotten. But
going and I find it hard because he's like, well, will you just ask me? And I'm like, but I feel bad if I'm asking you for these things, and yet some reason I think it's going to be perfectly fine if I just hint at him. Man, my back like really hurts. Yeah, just really hurts. Like, some reason I think that's fine, but me just saying, hey, will you rub my back, it hurts, isn't. And so
Yeah.
having that clear communication and not being scared of that. And sometimes that's what you need. Whenever you're dating, you're told that's the time that you get to know the other person, you learn all about them, you know all these things. And then you get married because you like them and you feel that's where God's leading you. And that's where everybody always stops. But what I learned is it's not a bad thing to continue to grow and learn that person even more. Like, just the other day, I suddenly was just like, I feel like a terrible wife because I didn't know that he didn't like butterscotch.
But you never asked me.
I never asked him if he liked butterscotch. It never came up in a conversation,
So I
and
told her,
that's
don't
okay.
feel terrible. Don't feel like a terrible wife.
But
I never told you.
I had gone, and I was just like, why do I feel like that's suddenly a bad thing? Of like, I didn't know this before getting married. I should have known that. That's such a basic thing, and yet I didn't. But realizing that you want that. You're going to learn all these different things. Your life is never done growing and learning the other person.
Always be pursuing and learning. I've heard it said, get a PhD in your spouse, and I think it's so true. Like, you start here, you think you know them. When you get married, you're literally just barely touching the iceberg of really getting to know them. Like, we both have, and it's like, we're talking about it tonight, like all the different things that we have learned about each other since getting married. So, lots and lots and lots. Well, this video has gone a little bit long.
And I don't even remember what we talked about throughout it.
Lots of random stuff.
Yeah, we
Rabbit
probably
trails.
got off on a lot of things, didn't stick to one topic, but it happens.
It
and
happens.
we hope that this has pointed you back to what really matters in life, of honoring and glorifying God in all that we do throughout life, and that ultimately you are encouraged throughout this.
Keep going. If you're in a relationship, if you're married, you probably are far ahead of us, but if you're in a relationship and you're young and you're questioning, is this the right thing to do? Seek God first and foremost. Listen to those around you. Get as much counsel as you can without overwhelming yourself. We know the feeling of having tons of people tell us what to do, but seek older, wiser people, and ultimately seek God's word, because people can fail. So seek God's word, seek God first.
Because everybody's story is going to be different. Don't be
Right.
afraid if you haven't met somebody who's been married at the same ages as you, or looking into that. If your story does not match up with somebody else's, make sure it matches up with
Praise
yours.
the Lord, every story is different, because if we all were the same, it'd be boring. So, you know what? Take a step. If that's what God's calling you to do it. And be sure to go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and all the normal stuff. And we look forward to seeing you next week.